General Hospital spoilers for the week of August 18th to 22nd indicate that Maxie Jones will collapse, Dr. Britt Westbourne will be in danger, and Jocelyn Jacks will be held at gunpoint. The ABC soap has just issued its weekly preview, and as usual, it provides explosive insight into what will happen in the land of Port Charles over the following 5 days. The teaser begins with Jason Morgan in the doorway of Britt's Five Poppies resort room, where she is sitting on the bed. The two wistfully stare at each other as a close-up of Jason appears, telling her, "You're in danger," as she watches in concern. Fans can tell Britt is being held against her will, and the mysterious man who is doing so is using her medication as a bargaining chip to keep her conducting research and lab work. The key issue is, who is the mystery man, and will his identity be disclosed during the week of August 18th? As the General Hospital preview progresses, Jason is seen at a table someplace on the resort, while Joss peeks through the rose bushes. She may have taken a stroll, noticed Jason, and then concealed behind the flowers. Regardless, Joss' voice can be heard in the background as she says, "We have a problem." It almost appears that Jason has noticed Jocelyn in the preview video. However, this is most likely simply editing, and only time will tell. As the ad progresses, the following footage shows Joss opening the door to her resort room to what appears to be Pascal, who is on the set of Home and Heart for another Deception episode. Lucy is speaking with the host, Flora Gardens, while Brooklyn Quartermain Chase is off on the side of the set, watching. As Lucy and Flora discuss Deception's skincare line, Maxie is shown applying skin cream before feeling uncomfortable, obviously shaky, and then collapsing. Fans can hear all three ladies shout "Maxie" as she collapses to the ground. According to General Hospital spoilers, Kirsten Storms will be absent from the program this week as she prepares to relocate from Los Angeles to Tennessee. Thus, how will Maxie's leaving storyline play out? Will she be kidnapped after collapsing? General Hospital spoilers state that a preview clip has been published for Monday, August 18th, 2025. It shows Britt Westbourne making a desperate plea to Jason Morgan. Stella Henry confronts medical fraud investigators. Plus, Maxie Jones is concerned about a court battle. Continue reading and let's discuss what's coming up on the ABC soap drama. Brooklyn Quartermain has been called out. Since the truth about Gio Palmieri was revealed, the brunette has been aloof from Lois Cerullo. In the preview for the next episode, BLQ says to an unseen individual, "You think I'm being unjust to my mother, don't you?" Portia Robinson's discovery after having a fantastic and weird time in the bedroom. Curtis Ashford confesses to Portia Robinson. The spouse informs the good doctor that Stella could be in serious peril. Stella Henry's fraud interrogation. Speaking of Stella, she is in the hospital beside Jordan Ashford. Stella and Jordan are taken off guard by two beefed-up medical fraud inspectors. Thank goodness Jordan is there. Even though she is no longer a police officer, she can provide Stella some fast advice. Stella will definitely need it after aiding Martin Gray. Even though her heart was in the right place, it could come back to haunt her. The amazing thing is that Drew Kane set this into action with that fatal phone call. So what happens when Martin's guilt finally gets to him? After all, Martin seemed to have taken a fancy to Stella. Drew Kane's threat. Fans will also witness Drew making a threat on Sonny Corinthos. The congressman responds, "Or your golden boy Michael Corinthos, played by Rory Gibson, is going straight to prison." I believe Justine Turner's unplanned meal with Sonny and Donna Corinthos will ignite some interesting storylines. Monday, August 18th, 2025 plus, Britt encourages Jason to accompany her quickly. The brunette appears terrified and alarmed. So, while she may not have much time to explain, she will almost certainly encourage Jason to follow her lead. Maxie will also consult Martin for legal guidance. The blonde is worried that voting against the others on Sonny's disastrous investment may cost her her job at Deception. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing in the week of August 18th, 2025? Share your opinions in the comments area below. Remember to keep watching ABC soap operas to see what happens next. Jocelyn Jacks stood straight in a poorly lit warehouse on the docks, her heart hammering so loudly that she was certain her abductor could hear it. The chilly barrel of a gun pressed into her temple, the metal digging into her skin. Her gaze raced around the room, looking for an exit, but the man holding her was no amateur. His grip was firm, his voice low and frightening as he yelled orders into a phone. "You have an hour. Bring it or she's done." Jocelyn's mind raced, trying to figure out how she'd gotten here. She'd been pursuing a lead regarding a shipment related to her Uncle Sonny's business, which she wasn't supposed to know about. Her curiosity had always been her strength, but now it was her undoing. The man's eyes glinted with impatience, and Jocelyn knew she needed to remain cool. She had been in tight situations before, but this was different. The air was charged with danger, and every second felt like it could be her last. She remembered her mother, Carly, and how she would battle tooth and nail to find her. But will it be sufficient? Meanwhile, Britt Westbourne was on her own risky journey. The hospital had been her safe haven, a place where she could immerse herself in work and forget about the upheaval of her personal life. However, tonight the clean halls of General Hospital felt like a trap. She'd gotten an anonymous note under her office door earlier that day saying, "You're not as safe as you think." She dismissed it at first, because Port Charles was full of grudges and petty threats. However, as the night progressed, the hospital became strangely silent, and Britt couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her heels clicked against the linoleum as she rushed quickly toward the exit, clutching her phone tightly in her hand. She tried calling Jason, but the call didn't go through. Now, as she rounded a corner, she stopped. A silhouetted person stood at the end of the hallway. The gleam of something metallic in their hand sent shivers down her spine. Britt's instincts told her to go, but her legs seemed fixed to the spot. She was a doctor, not a combatant, but she wouldn't give up without a fight. Maxie's breakdown did not go unnoticed. A small throng had formed and someone dialed 911. Paramedics arrived soon, their dazzling lights shining through the dusk. They worked efficiently, checking her vitals and transferring her onto a stretcher. Her best friend Sam McCall pushed past the crowd, her face pallid with concern. "Maxie, do you hear me?" she called but received no response. Sam's thoughts raced. She knew Maxie had been under strain, but this was different. Poison? A medical condition? Or was there something more sinister about Maxie's secrets? As the ambulance raced toward General Hospital, Sam hopped in beside her, clutching her hand. She couldn't ignore the suspicion that this was linked to the same dark forces enveloping Port Charles that she'd been investigating for weeks. Sam's thoughts turned to Jocelyn, who had not answered her phone all day. A knot tightened in her stomach. Something was extremely wrong. Back at the warehouse, Jocelyn's captor became irritated. His phone call had ended abruptly, and now he strode in front of her, the gun still pointed at her head. "You're more trouble than you're worth," he whispered, his voice heavy with an accent Jocelyn didn't recognize. She forced herself to remain calm, channeling all of the courage she had inherited from her mother. "You don't have to do this," she replied, her voice firm despite the horror that gripped her insides. "Whatever you're looking for, I can help you get it." The man chuckled harshly, which echoed off the rusting walls. "Do you believe you're in control here?" Jocelyn's thoughts raced. Who is the bait for? Sonny? Carly? Or is it someone else? She needed to gain time by identifying a weakness. Her gaze roamed the area once more, this time stopping on a loose pipe in the corner. If she could just get to it, she might stand a chance. However, the gun at her head served as a continual reminder of her limited margin for error. Britt's situation deteriorated dramatically. The stranger in the hallway had not moved, but the gap between them was closing as Britt backed away. Her thoughts turned to her brother, Peter, and the legacy of danger he had left behind. Was it his doing, even from beyond the grave? Or was it someone new, connected to the hospital's recent spate of strange events? She reached into her pocket, her fingertips brushing over the scalpel she had reflexively grabbed before leaving her office. It was not much, but it was something. "Who are you?" she called, her voice echoing along the empty corridor. The figure did not respond, but they took a step forward, the metallic gleam now plainly indicating a knife. Britt's heart was pounding, but she refused to let fear paralyze her. She'd faced harder odds before, surviving Faison and outwitting Peter. She could do it. She simply needed to be alert and wait for an opening. Maxie was transported to General Hospital's emergency room. The medics worked feverishly, conducting tests to establish the cause of her fall. Sam lingered nearby, her gaze sweeping the room for any evidence of wrongdoing. She had seen too much of Port Charles to believe in coincidences. Her phone buzzed and she looked at the screen. A text from Dante. Jocelyn is missing. Last seen at the docks. Sam's blood raced cold. Jocelyn was in trouble and Maxie was down. This did not happen at random. Someone was threatening the people she cared about, and she wanted to find out who and why before it was too late. She snuck out of the ER. Her mind had switched to investigator mode. She'd start at the docks, retrace Jocelyn's movements, and hope she hadn't walked into a trap. Jocelyn's abductor was distracted for a few seconds by a disturbance outside the warehouse. It was all she needed. She grabbed for the pipe, clamping her fingers around the cold metal just as the man turned around. "Do not move," he shouted, raising his rifle. But Jocelyn was already swinging, the pipe connecting to his arm. The rifle clattered to the ground and Jocelyn dove for it, her hands shaking as she grabbed it. She aimed it at him, her breath breathless. "Stay back," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. The man smirked, unfazed. "You don't have the guts," he murmured, stepping closer to her. Jocelyn's finger hovered above the trigger. She didn't want to shoot, but she was prepared to do so if necessary. Her thoughts turned to her family, to the life she was unwilling to give up. She only needed to fend him off until aid arrived, if it came at all. Britt's standoff in the hospital corridor was reaching a breaking point. The figure lunged, his knife cutting through the air. Britt avoided, her reflexes honed over years of survival in a perilous environment. She swung the scalpel and caught the attacker's arm. They hissed in pain and stumbled back, but did not flee. "You can't run forever," they snarled, their voices muffled by the mask. Britt's mind raced. This was no coincidence. The note, the attack, it was all deliberate. She needed to get to the security office, where cameras and personnel could provide assistance. However, the figure was blocking her passage, and the hallway felt as if it was closing in. She grasped the scalpel firmly, her gaze fixed on her attacker. "I don't know who you are," she continued, her voice low and firm, "but you picked the wrong person to mess with." As the night progressed, the threads of these three crises became intertwined. Sam approached the docks, revolver drawn, and crept toward the warehouse where Jocelyn was struggling for her life. Inside, Jocelyn was pushed into a corner, the gun in her grip becoming heavier with each passing second. Britt was making a desperate dash toward the hospital's security office, her attacker following closely behind. Maxie's condition was stabilizing in the emergency room, but the doctors discovered something concerning in her blood work, a chemical that should not have been present. Sam's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "You're next." The words sent shivers down her spine, but she pressed on, driven by the desire to save Jocelyn and discover the truth. The warehouse was silent except for a slight drip of water and Jocelyn and her captor's ragged breathing. He was now circling her and testing her resolve. "You're not getting out of this," he continued, his voice full of malice. Jocelyn's hand shook, but she kept the rifle steady. She'd never shot anyone before, but she was familiar enough with her family's culture to know how to bluff. "Try me," she replied, her voice frigid. Outside, Sam's footsteps were hushed as she neared the warehouse door. She could hear voices inside, including Jocelyn's. Relief overwhelmed her, but it was fleeting. She needed to enter without being spotted, and she needed to do so quickly. Britt entered the security office and slammed the door behind her, locking it. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone to call for help, but the line was dead. Of course it was. She glanced to the monitors, looking for her attacker. The hallway was now vacant, but that did not imply they had left. Britt's mind raced. There was a pattern here, a connection she didn't recognize. The note, the attack, Maxie's breakdown, Jocelyn's disappearance. It was all bound together, but how? She needed to get to Sam and warn her, but first she had to survive. A loud bang on the door made her jump. They were coming for her, and time was running short. Maxie moved around in the emergency room, her eyelids flickering open. The doctors were speaking quietly, their expressions somber. "What is happening?" she whispered, her voice faint. One of the doctors hesitated before responding. "We discovered evidence of a poison in your system." "You were poisoned," Maxie said, her heart sinking. "Poisoned? By whom?" Her thoughts turned to the mysterious messages she'd been getting, which she had disregarded as pranks. Someone was targeting her, and she was beginning to piece things together. But she was too feeble to do anything, locked in a hospital bed while the outside world descended into anarchy. Sam slipped into the warehouse with her rifle up. She noticed Jocelyn in the corner, pointing a rifle at a man who was slowly approaching. Sam's heart tightened. Jocelyn was tough, but she was still a child in over her head. "Joss, I'm here," Sam said softly, moving into the light. The man spun around and everything froze. Then he leaped toward Jocelyn, and Sam did not hesitate. She fired and the shot echoed throughout the warehouse. The man collapsed, holding his leg, and Jocelyn lowered the rifle, her hands trembling. "Sam!" she gasped, sprinting to her. Sam drew her into a brief hug, but there was no time for relief. "We need to move," she whispered, her gaze drawn to the shadows. Whoever was behind this was not finished yet. Britt's situation became increasingly serious. The banging on the security office door was incessant, and the lock wouldn't last much longer. She took a fire extinguisher from the wall and prepared to use it as a weapon if necessary. Her phone rang with a text from Sam. "Joss is safe. Get out of there." Britt's relief was tempered by the gravity of her position. She needed to get away, but the only way out was across the corridor where her attacker was waiting. She took a long breath, bracing herself. She had survived worse. She could do it again. She unlocked the door and prepared to battle, holding an extinguisher in one hand and a scalpel in the other. As Sam and Jocelyn departed the warehouse, Sam's thoughts were already racing forward. The man she had shot was not the mastermind. He was simply a hired gun. Someone greater was pulling the strings, and they knew exactly how to hit Port Charles where it hurt. Maxie's poisoning, Jocelyn's kidnapping, and Britt's attack were all connected, forming a web of vengeance or power that Sam was determined to unravel. She looked at Jocelyn, who appeared frightened but unhurt. "You're okay," Sam replied, more to convince herself than Jocelyn. But the threat wasn't over. Maxie was piecing together her own clues in the hospital. The toxin, the notes, the timing, all pointed to someone from her past, someone who knew her flaws. She forced herself to sit up against the doctor's protests. "I need to talk to Sam," she replied, her voice becoming stronger. The doctor hesitated, but Maxie's look persuaded her to relent. As Maxie reached for her phone, a fresh message appeared. "This isn't over." Her blood raced cold, but she was no longer terrified. She was angry. Whoever was doing this had underestimated Maxie Jones, and they were about to discover how lethal she might be if pushed too far. Britt rushed into the corridor, flailing the extinguisher as her attacker attacked again. The heavy metal struck their shoulder, sending them staggering back. Britt didn't wait to see if they'd recover. Instead, she dashed for the hospital's main entrance, her pulse racing. She heard footsteps behind her but did not look back. She simply kept moving, her mind set on one goal: survival. As she approached the lobby, she noticed security personnel run toward her, alarmed by the commotion. For the first time that night, she felt a spark of optimism. She was going to make it. Sam and Jocelyn arrived at the hospital just as Britt emerged, breathless, disheveled but alive. The three women locked eyes, and a wordless understanding passed between them. They were in this together, and they were not giving up without a fight. Sam's phone buzzed again with another message from an unknown number. "You can't protect them all." She displayed it to Jocelyn and Britt, her jaw tightening. "Whoever this is, they're done," she declared, her voice steely and determined. The night hadn't ended, and the danger was far from over, but they were prepared. Port Charles was their home, and they would fight to protect it, and each other at any cost. The hours that followed were a whirl of police reports, hospital examinations, and quiet chats. Maxie was healing, her strength returning as the antidote passed through her system. Jocelyn was shaken but defiant, plotting her next step to discover who had targeted her. Britt, ever the survivor, was cooperating with hospital security to find her attacker. And Sam was at the center of it all, piecing together clues and desperate to discover the person responsible for the catastrophe. The messages, the toxin, the gunpoint standoff, and the knife in the corridor were all part of a greater plan, which was still unfolding. As morning came over Port Charles, the city appeared to clutch its breath, waiting for the next move in a game no one had chosen to play. But one thing was certain. Maxie, Jocelyn, and Britt were not simply victims. They were fighters and were prepared for whatever came next.